What is up, creatives? And if you haven't heard about Anchor, it is the easiest and cheapest way to make your podcast. Some of the features are that it has creation tools to record and edit your podcast right in the app or online. It can distribute your podcast to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other platforms. And most importantly, it is free. Plus, you can make money on your podcast with no minimum listenership. Everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Go and download the free Anchor app or go online to anchor.fm to get started. What is up, creatives, and welcome to the Revolution Roundtable podcast. I am your host, Joshua. And before I start, please join the conversation at the round table by subscribing to this podcast, sharing it with your friends, and rating us on all platforms. That greatly helps the podcast grow and gets more eyes on it. We would appreciate that very much. Today's topic is, what is Activism? So what is Activism? Activism is a kind of clash of creative art and social activism. So when we talk about creative artists that use their talents to bring about change, when we talk about hip-hop, it came from rapping about the injustices going on in urban communities. When we talk about poetry, slam poetry especially, it's about using your creative pen in a way to illustrate what you see on a day-to-day basis in your urban area. And our sponsor, which is Spiritual Revolution, the collective, is just a creative collective of artists, people who are using their art for change, whether that's, social change and social justice, whether that's in spiritual change, when we talk about spirituality and Christianity, when we talk about, financial change, we really want to be a business, we want to be entrepreneurs and be successful financially. And that's what being an artivist is using your creative gifts to bring about change. And that is kind of the theme of what Spiritual Revolution is. The first time I heard the term Activism was from a Chicago poet and activist. His name is Malcolm London. Malcolm London has been a voice in Chicago for many years. We talk about, school to pipeline system. He's been very vocal about that. He's been at protests. He's been on the front lines of Chicago activism, and he's also a great poet. And he had a poet that was talking about the four corners of his neighborhood. And at the end of the poem, he talked about how he had to use his art for change because his perspective is important. And that's what the mind of all activists are, is that we're using our voice because it is a different perspective. And once we use it like that, it's revolutionary. It's life-changing. When we talk about in the slavery days, we had preachers in their sermons were actually poems, were these long poems, and the way they use their art to use words to preach the word of God to other, suffering black folk. And in the way they were artists, even preachers today, they are using their words as poetry. When we talk about the Bible, like 1/3 of the Bible is poetry, and it's talking about spiritual change. It's talking about having a relationship with God. And, Activism has been around for as long as time, so that's how important Activism is. And why am I saying, why is the first episode about Activism? Well, Activism is obviously the theme of spiritual revolution, but Activism is also very relevant in today's culture. When we talk about, like I said, Kendrick Lamar, all hip hop, when we talk about poetry, slam poetry, we talk about paintings, we talk about, videography, filmography, short films that, kind of illustrate what the hood is like. Activism is very relevant today, and that's why spiritual revolution is we're using that for a vehicle. And that's why it's important. Like I said, it has been along since the beginning of time. When God created the heavens and the earth, that was a form of art. How he created Adam and Eve was poetic. And how he sent his son down is change. And that's how it relates to Activism. That's how it relates to our lives. I know this was kind of a short episode, but if you like this episode and you made it this far, I greatly appreciate it. Subscribe to this podcast, share it with a friend, rate us on all the platforms, and stay tuned for more episodes. And again, thank you for joining the conversation at the Round Table. I'm your host, Josh. Godspeed.